Welcome back, everybody, to Pixel Project Radio, the video game podcast where we talk all about the games that we love and some that you love too. It's me, the maestro of the podcast, appropriately enough, Rick Firestone. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. And if you're new here, welcome all the same. We hope you enjoy what you hear. Take a seat. The water's fine. So, just a quick, brief social plug at the end of the episode. Make sure you stick around because I am going to plug our socials, the Twitter, the Instagram, the Discord, the Patreon. And, more importantly, I'm going to let our guest plug their socials as well. And without further ado, I want to give a curtain call. Well, no, curtain call is after the performance. I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to introduce my guest. He is the host of the barSILENCE video game music podcast, appropriately enough. It's an excellent, excellent show, and he's an excellent, excellent guy. Everyone, please welcome Jameson. Hey, man, thanks for coming.
Hey, Rick. Thanks for having me on, man. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited too. First time on the show, and I don't think we could have set up a better topic because, as listeners with eyes probably saw, the title of this episode and what we're talking about today is the music around one particular composer that is often called, I'm not sure that I agree with this, but he is often called the Beethoven of video game soundtracks. We are talking about the one, the only, the irreplaceable, and the inimitable Nobuo Uematsu and his soundtracks and his music. And I'm so excited.
Dude, me too, man. I don't know if I could possibly find better words for it than that.
He's a legend. I mean, everybody that plays video games, almost everybody that plays video games, either knows of him or has heard his work, especially in recent years with some game called Final Fantasy VII, but we'll get there. Before we get into our community forum, which is, where we like to give our Discord members a little time to shine, I wanted to ask you, do you remember the first game that you played that had an Uematsu soundtrack?
Yeah, actually, this was in retrospect. I learned it was actually Rad Racer for the NES. I didn't know that until years later looking him up online. But the first time I would say that I really recognized his music and knew who he was playing Final Fantasy VI. I had a copy of Final Fantasy III on the Super Nintendo way back, and I just remember that the game and the world were astounding. Everything about how that game played, the components of the characters, I loved all of them. But the thing that always stuck with me was the music, and it was actually definitely one of the first soundtracks from a game that I, in my youth, was trying to find a way to record my favorite tracks into some format so I could listen to them outside the game.
That's so funny because so much of that rings true to me too. I feel like that's so interesting. An introduction to Uematsu through Rad Racer is, I'm sure that's the case for many folks, but for folks of a certain age, it's almost always Final Fantasy something, right?
For sure.
And man, the Final Fantasy VI soundtrack, we're going to talk all about Final Fantasy. Don't you worry. Don't take the finger off of the enter key. Promise we'll get there. But my situation with Uematsu and discovering him was largely the same as yours. It wasn't quite that long ago in terms of his trajectory. My first game that I ever played with him as the composer was Final Fantasy IX. That was one of the first PlayStation video games that I ever had. Certainly the first one that made me realize that video games were really cool. And then shortly after, almost at the same time, I was playing 7 and 8 as well. And it's been constant in my life. The theme of Final Fantasy IX is something that has just been in my bones since I was a kid. And I'm so excited to be doing this episode. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah, me too, man. It's funny because on my show, so a little bit it's an hour or so. I usually try and keep it around there, and we listen to music. But it's really hard to encapsulate the absolutely astounding library of songs that this man's created. So I'm excited to talk about it on your show because you have such a wonderful background in music, and I feel like you'll probably be able to speak better to it than I can.
I don't know about that, but I'll do my best. Some other folks that are particularly good about talking about music and other things are members of our Discord. So again, I'm going to plug this at the end, but if you want to be a part of the community, you can join, and we have this channel called the Community Forum where folks can give their thoughts, opinions, feelings about whatever video game or topic we're doing. So today we got a couple of responses about the music of Nobuo Uematsu, and I wanted to read some of them. First up is a first-time contributor, Ray Ray. In our Discord, he's known as Ray Ray the Quiet Man, because he played that game called The Quiet Man, and it's a bad video game, and Ray Ray loves bad video games. Those are his words. I'm not slandering. So here's what Ray Ray has to say about Uematsu. Final Fantasy IV is my favorite video game soundtrack of all time. Uematsu just has the ability to immerse you into the setting. It was so easy to get lost in games that have his music because of his hypnotizing tracks. His soundtrack can make you feel jubilant, Cid's theme from Final Fantasy IV, hopeful, Searching for Friends, Final Fantasy VI, mystified, Silent Light, Chrono Trigger. His music gives you a lot of various feelings, and that is such a wonderful gift to have. Oh yeah, well said. Well said. Beautiful.
That's excellent, man.
We're going to move through these because we've got quite a bit to talk about. But next up, we've got Real Dave Jackson from Tales from the Backlog. Here's what he has to say. What can I say about Uematsu that hasn't already been said? His mastery of many different genres, leitmotif, and a knack for a memorable melody lend the games an extra layer of emotion and storytelling, especially in the era before voice acting. From To Xanarkand in Final Fantasy X to the opera in Final Fantasy VI to the many memorable character themes through the years. Tifa's theme comes to mind immediately. His place on video game composing Mount Rushmore is a lock. No arguments from me here. And those are good picks, too. Chris Copleen from the Retro Hangover podcast has this to say. How can anyone have a serious conversation about video game music without mentioning Nobuo Uematsu? He's easily one of the best and most accomplished in the industry. Whether it be from when most of us older folk probably first heard him in Rad Racer, hey, Jameson, there you go, his efforts with Mistwalker, the occasional tune for Idea Factory games, or, of course, Final Fantasy, this man feels like he has done it all in the world of JRPGs. And the one thing that impresses me the most about him is his ability to be incredibly varied but also familiar at the same time. His music can run a broad spectrum of genres and subgenres to ragtime, rock, metal, and folk, but yet when any of his soundtracks are listened to in their totality, you can always tell it's him. Genius in the field. I'm telling you, man, our Discord members are well-spoken, and I can't disagree with any of it so far.
No, not at all. I totally think that those guys have a beautiful way of using language to describe it. I agree. The emotions and feelings that this man can convey with music is incredible.
And I've saved the most well-spoken for last from Discord regular Mikey Tabletop of the Big Drink Energy podcast. He says, Nobuo Uematsu? More like yes boo woo wee matsu. There you have it. It's perfect.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, Mikey has a way with words, just as we all do. So a couple of things up front of this episode. I just want to set some expectations. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk a little bit about the man himself. Then we're going to get into some of his compositional aspects, what you can expect from listening to him, some of his general aesthetics, his trademarks in his style. And then we're going to move into 3 selected works for this episode. We are going to talk about 3 OSTs that Jameson and I have collaborated on and discussed ahead of time. We're going to talk about them, what we liked about them, what we didn't. And there may even be a Final Fantasy debate somewhere in there. But that's going to be sort of the layout of the episode. We're not going to talk about every single track on the OSTs we talk about, just because that would be a really long podcast. So if we don't mention your favorites, what I encourage you to do is reach out on Twitter or on Instagram or in the Discord and start a conversation. Jameson kind of alluded to this, but my background is in music. I'm not going to wave those credentials around right now, but I like talking about it a lot. I'm a little out of practice in terms of like my verbiage and my term knowledge. Terminology is the word that I couldn't think of there. But I'm always down to talk. So, and I'm sure Jameson is too. He is a member of the Discord, and he will happily speak. We can all have a conversation together. So I encourage you to do that anyway, you know?
Yeah, please do. I love talking about video game music with pretty much everybody. There is no like or dislike that I couldn't probably agree with. Video game music is meant for us, and it's created for us to enjoy, and I think that's going to be the fun part about this episode, is that we can talk about what we like and know that there's still more to uncover.
Hear, hear, man. Well said. Do you have a favorite OST of his?
It's like picking a favorite child.
So very easy, as I understand it from all my friends that have children.
Incredibly easy.
You know, you just look at one of those kids and you're like, I don't care for Job, you know?
Excellent. Yeah, honestly, if I had to say if I had a favorite, I could probably say the ones that I have more experience with, or ones that I like to come to from time to time. I have a deep love of the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack in particular. It's one of my favorite games. It's just there's so much variety in it, and just between the individual themes, the world map songs, all those kind of things in Final Fantasy VII stayed with me. I find it really listenable outside of the game. And in even like a couple tracks have made it onto my show so far, and some mixtapes. So it's a good soundtrack. I also really love Final Fantasy IX though, because it's so incredibly different.
Oh yeah. There's a quality to 7. I let me be clear. I like 7's soundtrack a lot. There's a quality to it, and I don't know. I associate it with sci-fi. But I'm not prepared to like sort of discuss the music terminology around it, but it's not my favorite. I like it a lot. It's not my favorite.
I lean heavy into like cyberpunk and that kind of steampunk vibe. Like I relate that. So the soundtrack itself still kind of connects with that for me. For me, I mean, a really short version of it is what I really like about it is it's this awesome halfway point between what he was doing in his earlier music on the Super Nintendo and like right before everything became full audio quality CD audio music, and it's perfect because it's a blend of real instruments at times with like 16-bit MIDI type sounds, and you can tell that it came out in the early PlayStation days, which is whatever. It gives me a lot of nostalgia. I think that's what's the deep cut for me.
Yeah, I mean that's well said, and that's valid. The jump from the SNES to the PlayStation opened up a lot, and we'll talk about that when we get into Uematsu the man. As for me, Final Fantasy IX, I think is always going to be my favorite. It fights tooth and nail with Final Fantasy VI to be like my number one favorite. One that we're going to talk about today, which I'm not going to spoil just yet, has shot up to maybe top 3, definitely top 5. Actually, let's just say top 5, but we're going to get there. I don't want to spoil it just yet, but yeah, Final Fantasy IX and 6, I mean, he just put his whole soul into those tracks, and it is an incredible thing to hear. He did the same with 7 and 8 too. 8 in particular, it's just an incredible OST. The man has earned his. He's not really retired, but he's certainly not as active anymore, and he's earned it 3, 4, 12-fold.
Totally agree, man. I love Final Fantasy VIII. I feel like that soundtrack's one of those ones where people maybe have a hard time separating it from the game itself. Personally, I love both, but I'm glad that you mentioned that one.
It must be. It's a fan favorite, and for good reason. Let's talk about the man himself, though. So most folks know the happy-faced man known as Nobuo Uematsu, a very cute old man that likes to wear beanies and just has a very infectious-looking smile. He was born in March 21st to be exact, of 1959, and contrary to what you might think just by listening to him, he is entirely self-taught. He began playing the keyboard around age 11. He joined several bands after finishing an English degree at Kanagawa University, and some of his biggest influences were American and British music, like Elton John is the one that he cites as his biggest. He said he wanted to be just like Elton John, and he's also cited like the Beatles and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, some Pink Floyd. I'm spacing on some of the other ones, but he was not somebody that, you know, is this stereotype of growing up listening to only, you know, the three Bs, Beethoven, Bach, and Brahms, and just that kind of stuffy upbringing, for a lack of a better words. He was engrossed in popular music.
Yeah, I've seen him talk at length about Emerson, Lake and Palmer, which is a band that I know from my dad. So I had a little bit more of a connection to some of those bands that he listed, and I was like, oh, I can totally understand where that comes from. And you can hear it in his music too. It's not even that it's like derivative. It's that it's inspired by. Like, you can tell there's little pieces that like he likes to pick up from, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think derivative is not a word that you can use about a lot of his music.
Yeah, not at all.
Another thing that many folks might not know or might not expect is that he started composing as a side job. He didn't think that it would turn into a full career. He wanted to be a performer, you know, like Elton John or the Beatles or the Beach Boys. Like, that was what he wanted to do, and he composed just to earn a paycheck for a little bit. Oftentimes, like jingles for TV commercials. I couldn't find any of these, and I imagine if I were more fluent in Japanese that I could maybe search the internet, the Japanese side of the internet, you know, for that kind of thing. It didn't pan out for me this time, but shortly thereafter, in 1985, he joined Square. This was before the merger with Enix, Squaresoft. He composed a couple of works for them in the early days. The first one was in 1986, Cruise Chaser Blasty. Now, Jameson, you found the link to this soundtrack, right?
I did. It wasn't something that I had heard of before, so I had to go digging online. I came across it. It is interesting. It's, I would say, it fits into that bleep and bloop kind of Nintendo music. It's it's a little bit older sounding, but it does have some moments in it that are pretty inspired, I think, for the type of hardware that it was on.
Yeah, that's something we're going to talk about when we get into a few of these quotes that I found from him. The short version is that the NES only had 3 sound channels, and that sort of limitation is it can be really tough on composers, and he's been open about his experiences with that, and how even from the start he wanted orchestral live recordings, and he did eventually get it, but not quite yet. So shortly after Cruise Chaser Blasty, Blasty with 2 S's if that matters to you, and if it does, please reach out to me because I want to get to know you. Shortly after that, Sakaguchi approached Uematsu and asked if he would be interested in making games together. That is the famous Hironobu Sakaguchi of, obviously, Final Fantasy fame. But first, they made a couple of games that didn't really get much attention, including Rad Racer.
Hey.
What do you think of Rad Racer's soundtrack? I mean, we're not going to get in depth with it, but I listened to it, and you know, it's not bad. It's fine. You know, it's fine.
Yeah, it's still very much. You could probably put it in the bucket of what someone would expect video game music to sound like, but there's some upbeat nature to it that it makes it fun. It's actually kind of not. It fits the game itself. The idea is you're racing a car, and you know, I think that in itself gives you the fundamentals of what that should sound like. And I would say that the soundtrack to that's pretty fun. It matches the fun that you're supposed to be having during the game, despite it being not really my favorite racing game.
It helps trick you into thinking you're having fun.
Yeah.
You can tell listening to these older works that Uematsu is still sort of finding himself as an artist. He was still very young. You know, he's still growing, and it's really cool to listen to these early works and work your way up through to the now, because that progression as an artist is just incredibly inspiring. But after Rad Racer, you know, they had a string of games. It wasn't really working out. They weren't really big successes, so the Gooch was going to do one last final effort. Yeah, we can call him that. Listen. You go listen to the Final Fantasy VI episode. He was here with Chris and I. We know each other. We're pals. But he was going to do one last game, and if it didn't work out, he was going to finish his degree, Sakaguchi that is, and the rest is history because that game was Final Fantasy.
Yeah, isn't the background for the reason for the name was that was the whole thing? They wanted to have one final attempt at making a game that was going to be successful for Squaresoft at that point, right?
So that's one of those things where it was born out of a rumor, and it's such a romantic idea that I think they adopted it. Like,
okay.
Oh yeah, that's totally what we meant. Originally, they had Final Fight picked out. They like the alliteration of FF, like that sound. Like, I mean, they don't really have that sound in Japanese, but FF. And they wanted Final Fight. That was already trademarked, which is what prompted them to say, oh, well, Final Fantasy. How about that?
Okay. I'm glad to know that because I've been given and held on to apparently the moderately, like I guess we'll call it a half-truth version of that story for like probably way too long now.
I mean, if the creator says like, yeah, that's what we meant, it's safe to say it's fact, Right. Even if, contemporary sources at the time were like, it was like, it was a rights issue actually, but wink, wink, it was actually this romantic idea of like, it's my final go, He's being an artist. That's what artists do. They romanticize everything.
That's true, man.
I do it. We all do it. Something that's really cool about Uematsu is that he is one of, maybe less so today because video games are becoming more and more popular seemingly by the minute, but he was one of the first composers to have his music recognized and played outside, not only outside of Japan, but in, non-video game settings. That was more common in Japan in the early days than it was out here. But sometime in the early 2000s, some orchestra did like works by him, and he was saying how honored he was, and he was like, this doesn't really happen outside of Japan. It's pretty crazy. His track from Final Fantasy VIII, Eyes on Me, actually won Song of the Year at the Japan Golden Disc Awards. That was the first time that a video game soundtrack had ever won.
That's amazing. I remember that happening because like it was a really big deal that like video games had reached that point where what could be composed for a game could be recognized as like true like music that moves and changes what your experience is in a game, and then for it to be recognized as an award through what was that group called again?
Japan Golden Disc Awards.
Golden Disc Awards, yeah. That's awesome, man. I don't really know much about the Golden Disc Awards, but to say it and have it be like memorialized in that fashion is pretty awesome, especially for 1998 or whenever that might have been.
Mm-hmm. I don't know the exact year. I didn't write it down, but late 90s, early 2000s, something like that. I found this quote of his from him, I should say, about where his love of music started, and it was actually with the Vienna Boys Choir, which I was not expecting. And here's what he has to say about that. He says, quote, "It really was a formative moment in my life. It was the first time I got a taste of how moving music can be. The emotional impact that hearing the Vienna Boys Choir had on me is definitely an experience that I wanted to recreate, but I wanted to do it in my own way." And that's pretty amazing. If you've ever heard the Vienna Boys Choir, it's a very ethereal experience. It's a very moving, sort of sound. These young boys singing soprano and the higher tessituras. It's really interesting, and it's just super cool to hear that he was listening to things like that as well as Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Elton John, Pet Sounds, and things like that.
Yeah, I actually don't have any experience with the Vienna Boys Choir, but I had to look into it a little bit because I'm like, I want to understand more about this and the type of music that is created, to know that the hymn in itself kind of shows some opposition, like where he was on like both sides of who he was as a person, that kind of frames in his compositional styles.
Mm-hmm. And that's important to note too. Like, it's important to say that he was self-taught. He really, really was raised on Elton John and these rock bands from the United States and Britain, Great Britain. But he also has a deep love of classical music with the Vienna Boys Choir. I found some of his votes for some kind of classical music award, something, and he was submitting like deep cuts from Ravel and Tchaikovsky. Awesome. He knows his stuff.
Awesome! Wow, that's pretty cool.
It is, man. It is. He's sort of like a musical chameleon. He's comfortable in so many different styles. But speaking of styles, let's sort of talk about his music as a whole and what you can expect when you listen to a Nobuo Uematsu soundtrack.
Yeah.
So like we said, largely influenced of Elton John, rock music from the States. This can be found in a lot of his OSTs. So many to mention. I mean, the first one that comes to mind for me is Zozo from Final Fantasy VI. That town, it's kind of like in a blues form. It's not quite, but sort of, and it's like MIDI, but you could tell he's thinking of electric guitar, sort of. Pretty cool.
That's definitely cool.
The Chocobo theme, the Final Fantasy VII Chocobo theme, I should say. It's I don't remember the exact like early surf rock band, but it's like one of those. Like he was listening to that. He's like, yeah, I'll do that.
I'm gonna show. Yeah, I love how many different versions of the Chocobo theme there are.
Yeah, do you have a favorite one?
That's another hard one. The one that comes to the top of my mind for some reason is because it cracks me up is Ukulele de Chocobo.
Well, that's actually my favorite one.
Okay, because I think it might be mine too. It cracks me up. It's something just awesome about that song every time I hear it. It puts a smile on my face.
It's, putting the melody in pitched percussion with, there's a test of my microphone technique, pitched percussion with marimba and the ukulele as accompaniment. It's perfect for that melody. The only Chocobo one that I can think of that I actively dislike is Techno de Chocobo from FF6. That just grates on my ears really badly.
It's really funny that you say that, because I was thinking like, oh shoot, maybe if he asked me what my least favorite one is, I'm gonna have to come up with one. And I was thinking Techno de Chocobo might be one of my least favorites.
I don't know, man. He makes a lot of bangers, but that ain't one of them. He's human, just like all of us. So we've talked about his influences. He says, as far as his influences go, that he gets more inspiration by walking his dog than listening to music. I
understand how that goes. I know you probably can recreate music, but I cannot. And I know that what I do graphic design professionally when I'm not obviously a super successful podcaster. And I honestly, it'll be when I'm doing the least interesting, most mundane thing when I come up with an idea that's been like stuck. It seems to be like that's like that creative person's outlet is doing something completely different, like cutting the grass or taking a shower or something. All of a sudden, it kind of clears your brain for a minute and gives you that kind of breakthrough that you need. So more inspiration from walking your dog actually probably makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, you're right on the money. I don't remember what this effect is called. I know I knew it at one point, but I remember being in grad school and a very good friend of mine, we were working on the same piece, and it was very technical, and we would practice it every single day, and then the weekend would come, we wouldn't practice, or we would take a day off, or maybe we would not practice that piece for the whole week. And then when we would come back to it, suddenly it was better than ever. And we were like, we didn't practice this for like a week. Why is it so good now? There's just something about it. There's something about that hyperfixation causing diminishing returns. And, it happens with all sorts of creative people, not just music. I mean, graphic design, art, dance. I mean, I'm sure it happens with all artists. Yeah, I would totally agree. I know that it's just one of those things that's that background processing element in your brain that gives you the solution, whether you're ready for it or not. Yeah, absolutely so. One trademark, it's not really a trademark because you can't trademark this, but one thing that Uematsu is particularly known for, and that he does incredibly well, and you've probably noticed this whether or not you know what this is his use of leitmotifs. Now, Jameson, do you know what a leitmotif is? I can give you my understanding of it, but I believe that a leitmotif is when something in particularly in the music here will call back to its original source. Is that correct? Yeah, you're on the right track for sure. It's a musical idea that represents a character, a feeling, a setting, an abstract thought. One of the most famous examples of this is in Wagner's opera The Ring. Uses leitmotifs like crazy. Another really famous example is in Hector Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique with the Idée fixe. It is taught in countless classrooms across the world. In Uematsu's world, one that comes to my mind immediately is Vivi's theme from Final Fantasy IX. And the reason I say that is because that theme gets used later on in the game during a particularly tragic event of which Vivi is a part, and you can hear that theme, that motif being used. You can also hear this, when Uematsu takes the main theme of the game and transforms it.
that represents sort of that game abstractly as a whole, and etc. etc. There are so many examples, but he is so good at doing this compared to other video game composers. It's really, really astounding, and he's good at it because people that don't know about music will pick up on it, and they'll say, "Hey, I know that tune. That was at the beginning," and it's like, yes, that's when you know that he knows what he's doing, when he can communicate complex ideas to folks that have an average understanding of what he's doing. It's very, very good.
Yeah, as especially in my youth, one of those average people that probably didn't recognize it. It was one of those things that actually gave me the stepping stone to better understand music as a whole. And while I never dipped my toes into the creation of it, I could find myself best as an appreciator of music. So when listening to his soundtracks, in particular, I had a short side story here. I do have a Final Fantasy 6 and 5 CD soundtrack that came with the Final Fantasy Anthology on the PlayStation 1. I had worked at EB Games at the time, and somebody had traded it in. And at the time, the CD was considered worthless, so my manager told me just to keep it. So when I would listen to this thing all of the time, I would listen to it in my car or listen to it at home. It was that idea of those leitmotifs, as you're saying, like that kind of like he teaches you what to expect in different moments throughout the game that upon re-listening is when I actually truly noticed how important they were.
Exactly so. And what makes them also so powerful, like he's not only teaching you what to expect and what to listen for, it's just that extra bit of je ne sais quoi that will make a scene more powerful. Like the scene that I mentioned in Final Fantasy IX would have been powerful even if he composed a different setting for it, but using a character's leitmotif within that composition and transforming it to sound less mischievous or curious and more defeated just gives it that little extra bit of artistic oomph that makes it so much more effective. And it's terrific.
I love that. I think that stuff's it's impressive. And it's in his music regularly, but the games themselves, that he can find those moments. I read somewhere that he said in a perfect world, he'd be able to write all of the music for a game after it was made. So the idea that he that he reads these like scripts and action sequences and then knows what kind of notes to create, what to do and when to use these things makes it really impressive to me.
Absolutely. But, the world isn't perfect, and sometimes we experience, writer's block of some sort. And I found this really terrific quote that he gave on the concept of writer's block. And by the way, I'm going to be inserting links to some of the sources that we consulted because Jameson and I worked together on this, which, and by the way, thank you very much, Jameson. But
hey,
I'm gonna I'm gonna put in some of the links that we consulted because there's some really truly fascinating material. But here's what he says on writer's block. He says, quote, "At those times, I wonder what I should do, and when I can't do it, there's nothing to do but give up. But those times when I've given up, surprisingly, I suddenly hit on an idea. Maybe it's essential to try giving up. Always. Every day." End quote. And that's exactly what we were just talking about with that taking a break. And then suddenly, when your mind is not hyper fixated on trying to solve this problem, you give it room to breathe and it comes up with what you have to say. It's incredible. I love that. It's essential to try giving up. Always. Every day. I love it.
I love it, man. That's great. That's great. Being creative doesn't come with an instruction manual, so sometimes you got to solve it on your own, and I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. If it came with an instruction manual, then there's already dime a dozen musicians coming out playing Coltrane better and better every day, so who knows? I found another quote of his. I found a couple of them, but this one you and I both commented on in the notes. So I'm going to read it, and then we can just talk a little bit about it, and then we're going to move into the OSTs that we picked. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, sounds great, man.
Cool. So this quote I found, I was just reading interview after interview with him, and he was asked how he felt, and I should have written down the date of this interview. It was certainly within the last 10 years. I think definitely within the last 5, but Don't quote me on that. And he was asked about his thoughts on current day music, game music specifically. Here's what he had to say. Quote, I feel that everyone, including myself, I guess, is simply making music that you've already heard somewhere else. That's not very exciting to me. I understand that video games are meant to be fun, of course, but they're also the cutting edge of entertainment technology. That's why I'd like to see people take a more experimental approach to them. In that sense, nobody comes to mind when you ask me if there's a composer who I'm a big fan of. But wait, I just remembered something. There is a Czech developer named Amanita Design. What they're doing is extremely interesting to me, both in terms of gameplay and in terms of the music. End quote. Jameson, I feel like I've been hogging the mic a little bit, so I just want to ask you, like, what do you have to make of that quote? Like, what are your thoughts on it?
There's a lot to pick apart in this one. I have to say, as a creative person, I definitely kind of understand that sometimes it feels like you're just creating something that's already been done. I know that in terms of music, in terms of art, and even graphic design, a lot of things feel like they've already been solved. And to some degree, it feels like all you do is remix, maybe. Like there's not necessarily a brand new take on anything. And it can be, and like the earlier quote, like it can be a little self-defeating. But I think what the important part here is that he talks about it being the cutting edge of entertainment technology. There's something interesting in the newness and the fresh sense of possibilities that come from that I think is interesting. I think because it's one of those paths that, like, when you find yourself developing, creating, making something, that if it's not something you're necessarily doing for yourself, you almost have to just keep doing it because you will. Totally just lost my train of thought. Jeez. I was saying, oh yeah, on the cutting edge of entertainment, the cutting edge of entertainment technology. Something that I really like about that statement is essentially that he's saying that video games themselves, as an entertainment form, as a source of storytelling and media, that even though it's still it's technically still a video game, what you can do with it is changing and evolving. And I don't know what Amanita Design is actually doing, and I really need to find out more, because if he's name dropping that, it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I didn't have the time to look them up either, so I'm not quite sure what he's touching on. But I want to go back to what you were saying in regards to, you know, when you have to create something that's not something that you're truly into, like you just have to do it. Specifically in terms of like a job or a contract. Remember, folks, that Uematsu, I mean, largely throughout his whole life, and especially now, he's a contractor. I mean, he's not an official employee. So he gets contracted to do these things. And when you're contracted to do stuff, you don't always get to, you know, have the luxury to pick and choose. I mean, certainly he does now, especially. But you don't always get to do that. So it becomes this notion of you have to make an artistic product because that's what is required to survive in our society. And this is the notion that I keyed in on as soon as I read this, because I've been ranting about this in the Discord and several Discords for a while now. But games, to me, there's this push these days, it seems, that AAA games in particular, to make things homogenous. Like the color palettes are always gray and black and brown and dark green. It's always hyper-realistic graphics. Everybody has to look like a real person. It's, you know, it's in it. There's always a gruff protagonist that's working to get to the end of the story, and, you know, they're no nonsense, and they've got trauma, they've been hurt, and you got to get to the end. And it's so exhausting, and it's not interesting. And it goes back to this idea that he's talking about, that these have been done before. I don't exclusively go to all media for a new experience every time. Like, I like being comforted and saying, like, I know how this is going to go. Like, I know this formula. But it is so boring to hear that all the time. It is so boring to go to a symphony and hear, oh, okay, this is Beethoven 6 for the umpteenth time. Where, oh, here we go. This is, oh, Brahms 2. How exciting. How exhilarating. And the reason that AAA games are falling into this formula, the reason that everybody plays Brahms, Beethoven, Sibelius, everybody that you know, is because it puts butts in seats. It gets money. And that sucks creatively because you don't have the risks. You don't get to take the risks, I should say, to make something new. So I I'm laser focused into this idea that he's talking about here. And this is something that bugs the heck out of me. This is why I love games that are so weird and creative and not, AAA big budget bangers like Plucky Squire. The Plucky Squire is something that I'm extremely excited about coming up. Revenant Hill is something that I'm extremely excited about. It's some of my favorite games of all time, Disco Elysium and Night in the Woods. They don't have quote unquote amazing graphics, but they deliver a unique experience and they have voices. The games have voices because they are unique artistic entities. This is what I'm talking about. And I'm really relieved to hear that you feel the same. I've said like what you said, but I've just expanded and made it like 3 minutes too long, and it's just all hot air.
Not even a little bit, man. I know exactly what you mean. Like, one of my favorite games I've played recently is What the Golf. If you know it,
I know of it.
It's a real short version. It's like a comedy golf game. You're not really playing golf like
that doesn't explain anything to me. I don't know what that is.
The best way to describe it is it has a bunch of like weird, quirky type of storytelling to it that you kind of self-discover. But like you'll be playing little holes, or what's it called, like a hole on a golf course where you hit the ball and the ball moves and everything's totally normal. And then the very next time you swing the ball, the character goes flying, hits the flag at the end, and it's a hole in one.
Okay,
so it
I
changes up your expectations each time, and it turns into different things. But they'll do a take on Mario. There's references to Portal in it. It's goofy and silly, and it was exactly what I needed because I can, as much as I love Uncharted, I don't need to play another game just like Uncharted.
Yeah, and that's the rub. It's like it's okay to want to play an experience like, oh, I just finished God of War. I loved it so much. I want that experience again, just maybe in a different flavor or like, maybe from a different angle. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think when we lean too hard into that and say like, oh, well, this isn't this, so it's bad. I don't like that, man. That's bleak shit. That's bleak shit.
It kind of sucks the soul out of things a little bit. It's like Marvel movies. I enjoy watching them, but it's not every movie is a Marvel movie. Or craft beer, for example. Not every beer needs to be an IPA. Like things change up for a good reason.
Or a particular bugbear of mine, not every IPA needs to be a hazy IPA. I'm so sick of hazy IPAs.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I picked up a hazy IPA the other day and I was like, maybe I'll give it a chance again. Nope. Not for me.
No. Yeah. Sometimes they just don't work for me.
I want to make something clear too, and I think you'll agree with me on this. There is nothing wrong with liking, a formula. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not saying that every AAA game falls into this trap. Somebody in another Discord was saying like, oh, these two games, they're so different. How could you say they're the same thing? And like, to me, if you like, have you ever seen in real life an impressionistic painting or I'm blanking on the title of the painting. It's Sunday in the Park, I think maybe. It's that very famous painting. The Office had it,
Is that the Claude Monet, I believe?
Yes, thank you, Claude Monet. If you stand too close to it, if you stand right up against it, it doesn't look very good. You see this with pointillism too. Like pointillism, if you stand too close to pointillism, it's just dots, right?
Yeah.
And if you take two pointillistic paintings side by side and you stand right up, you're going to be, oh my God. Like, I mean, not only do these not look like anything, but they look different to me. The colors are different. But if you take a step back and you view the whole painting, then you see the full picture. And then you can see like, oh, these are saying the same exact thing. That's what that's what it's like to me with games. Like, yeah, if you want to like zoom in, it's, oh my God, The Last of Us plays so different than God of War. Yeah, but if you take a step back, it's the same experience. It's the same sort of thing. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, I'm not saying those are the same game. I'm not. So put the emails away, put it back into the draft. But it's just this broader abstract concept. Everything is becoming samey, and I don't like it. I don't like it. I want to seek out these weird what the golf games where you hit the ball and your character's head flies off or something.
Yeah, I haven't got to that one yet, but I'm pretty sure it's in there. I believe it.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that's cool to me. I don't know.
It's those custom experiences. I feel the same way. Honestly, that's part of the reason that, like, for example, Katamari Damacy was such a huge game to me when I was like, what is that? Probably 10 some years ago. It was awesome. The world was surrounded with Gears of War, and in the middle of it was this tiny, colorful, ball-rolling guy who had to impress his god-sized universe dad by rolling up things on Earth and turning it into stars because he had destroyed them or accidentally lost them or something. Like, it was so ridiculous and colorful. Music is awesome, by the way, but it was fun because it was different.
This is a terrifically fascinating conversation, and
it's not about Uematsu.
I would love to keep going, but let's move on to the meat of this discussion and talk about the 3 OSTs we're going to talk about. Folks, if you have anything to say about this tangent that we just went on, please start a conversation in the Discord, whether you want to say, like, yes, you guys are both so right, or you guys can suck my so-and-so. You can tell us either way. Let us know in the Discord, Instagram message, Twitter message, whatever. But for now, let's talk about 3 OSTs. 3 varied OSTs by Nobuo Uematsu. Which one of these do you want to start with? The first 2 on the list. I'm leaning towards the second one. What about you?
We can start with the second one.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the first OST that we're going to talk about is Lost Odyssey.
Dun, 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 dun.
This game almost needs... Well, no, it does need an introduction. It does need an introduction because it does not get the credit that it deserves. This game, I've heard this game called Final Fantasy 13, the real one, a couple of times before.
Same. I've seen it.
It's very good to me. This came out in 2007 in Japan and 2008 in, the Western territories. And this was an Xbox 360 exclusive.
Yeah, there was quite the controversy over that, I remember.
You don't get a lot of JRPGs on Xbox that are Xbox exclusives.
Especially by a Japanese studio.
Yeah, that console did not sell very well over there, and I don't even know that the current generation of Xbox is selling well in Japan.
I hate to say it, but I feel like it's always kind of been the story. I mean, it probably is getting a little bit slightly larger each time, but it has been a tough sell in Japan for a while now. And I think the argument was that, especially for 360 era, was that the original Xbox didn't really have RPGs at all, so this was kind of their foray into doing so.
Yeah, they had Blue Dragon and Jade Empire. I think that's a JRPG, or at least an RPG, and that's really all I can think of. The reason that this gets called Final Fantasy 13 for real is that Sakaguchi was the guy. Like, he wrote the story, and I have only played a very little bit of it, but it is Final Fantasy. For all intents and purposes.
It kind of is. I myself have a pretty short experience with that game too, because I think I got it back when it came out on the 360. I was really excited about it. Just that Mistwalker had been founded, that Sakaguchi was getting together with Uematsu again. Like, there was just a lot of hype about that. And I kind of definitely, at least at the time, fed into the idea that, like, Sakaguchi was trying to get away from the PlayStation, so it seemed really entertaining to me. I needed to know why. Like, he wanted to create his own thing without Sony's influence, and I feel like getting to do so is part of why this game deviated a little bit from what it was expecting, because it was still your classic turn-based RPG.
Yeah, I too have only played a little bit of it, but it plays exactly like a Final Fantasy game. Your character runs way too fast, like comically fast, but other than that, that actually reminds me. I wanted to make this disclaimer up front, but I forgot. With these games, the first 2 in particular, we are talking strictly about the music. So if there is a track that, like, is really relevant to the in-game experience, I did not look into it, partly because, especially with Lost Odyssey, I did not want to be spoiled at all, because I want to play this. But we are strictly talking about the music. So, without further ado, let's talk about Lost Odyssey. The instrumentation, it's orchestral. There are some auxiliary instruments, though, possibly patched in via MIDI. I'm not super sure on that. It's kind of tough to tell these days.
Yeah, I don't know if I know either.
It's not all orchestral though, because like there's a track called Battle Conditions, which is it's kind of just like the Final Fantasy stuff that we're used to, but more raucous. Like it's driving electric distorted guitar. There's this very like fast 2 pattern on the drum set, like almost like pop punk pattern, but it's there's another pop filter test, like pop punk, but just with heavy accompaniment. And then you've got Uematsu's classic like synthesizer just riding over everything. It's really cool.
Definitely noticed that too upon listening. Once I found that link, I'm like, I gotta listen to the soundtrack because I remember the game, and I don't know if I ever really dove deep into it. Upon re-listening, it's great. It's honestly awesome. The main theme even has like a very Final Fantasy type of soaring vibe to it. It's pretty cool. I think it's worthy of listening even if you haven't played the game.
I'm really glad that you brought up the main theme because that was my first one that I took notes on as well. The prologue.
Cool.
This to me, this is a modern version of Terra's theme from Final Fantasy VI.
Excellent reference.
Immediately.
Yeah, that's the same thing I wrote down too. Yeah, it really does. It sounds like it just like a more robust, full version of what he was accomplishing in the Super Nintendo version of her theme.
It's more robust, yes. It's also it's got a different sort of character to it. There's this and again, I don't know the story of this game because I want to play it, but just the prologue, the main theme, it feels there's a sense of longing. There's a character of longing, like bitter longing, maybe painful nostalgia that is inherent in this melody, in this orchestration. I can see like an interpretation of the character of the music being forward moving, like somebody looking forward to the future, but there is a heaviness that is in this melody, just like in Terra's theme, but maybe a little bit more so. This is Uematsu as it gets. It is so good.
Yeah, that's a great reference, man, because I noticed that like tinge of sadness. There's a heavy emotional element to a lot of the songs on the soundtrack. You can tell that he's like casting that sensation that you can pick up through the audio on top of just whatever's probably happening in those scenes in the game that I also did not look into too much.
What what other song do you want to talk about from this album? What other track? What other piece?
A couple of the songs I thought were really interesting was some of the songs that have there's actually like a lot of mellow songs on this soundtrack that I think are great. He always does a really good job with that more atmospheric, environmental type of music. I wrote down, I don't know, I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong. It's like Salmon, the Town of Merchants. A super cool track. It's a music, it's like background music, something you can put on in your home or while you're doing something, while you're studying. It's one of those kind of tracks, and it was really enjoyable to listen to. I think I probably played that one 2 or 3 times in a row because I really liked it. And then the Never Ending Journey, as well as the Gun Barrel Battle. His battle music in this game is fantastic. Yeah,
the battle music is really interesting. It's not as forward driving as like Final Fantasy is, but it's almost more regal, like more processional than what we're used to with Final Fantasy.
Agreed. Yeah, and there's just a great combination of like instruments that he uses too. You can tell that there's a level of importance for each song, or whether it's a regular battles or it's boss battle. And I don't know, I appreciate the diversity in that, making a boss battle or a regular battle seem just as important as each other to some degree.
I could kind of see that. I think I would need to play the game to have a better read on that.
I could be totally wrong, but I feel like when you're going through the tracks, like I say this as a person who listened to it blind and not really looking up anything in the game, that when you see a song like Battles in the title or something, you can tell that there's just that extra drama involved in it. I think that's something that he does really well.
Oh, 100%. I agree completely. You had mentioned Final Fantasy VII as one of your favorite tracks, and there is a track on here that to me sounds like it could have been in Final Fantasy VII had the tech been better, and that is Epsilon Range.
That is an also excellent song. Yeah, that was something I wrote down too. I didn't write down that it sounded like Final Fantasy VII. I don't think I caught that, but I really did like that one, and that might be part of the reason why.
There's like a Oh, my memory is a little hazy, so if I say something that's dumb and listeners hear it playing, they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm doing my best here. But it feels like an art rock song to me. And there's a particular piano patch that is used, or like a synth patch, that reminds me of this area in Final Fantasy VII, the one that goes do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, like that area. It sounds just like that. Not like that. It's the part that comes after the bow, 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 bow. It sounds just like that synth patch to me. And that's when I was like, oh my God, this is a Final Fantasy VII song.
That's awesome, man. That song is really great, though, man. So good call out on that one.
What about some others? I have a couple more written down. What about you?
No, I don't actually. I didn't get super deep into it, so I didn't write down a whole bunch for this one. But if you got some, I'm all about it.
I do. I have a couple that I want to talk about. Two that I'll just mention, and then one that is like really good. A Sad Tolton. I liked that one a lot. It's very clearly Baroque inspired. Thinking back to music of like Vivaldi and obviously Bach, but it's a little maybe more like Handel than Bach. It's very lilting. It almost sounds like a saraband in some sections. A saraband it's in 3, but it's slow. And in a saraband, the 2 is accented. It's like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And there are sections in here that are just like that. It's very nice. We don't have to sit on that. There's another one called...
that song actually was really awesome. I do enjoy classical music, like I said, as like a common listener. But that song stood out to me because it was very like, I want to say processional. I don't know if that's the right word, but it has a flow to it that feels intentionally and deliberate. And I felt studious, and there's something important about it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a saraband is a slow dance. And I can't remember off the top of my head if it was like a peasant dance or like a nobility dance. Okay. But processional is not at all an incorrect way to describe it. It's pretty right on. Cool. There's another one. There's another one we don't have to talk about. Gangara's Plot. I'll just mention it because it's very good. But one that I did want to talk about is the final, as far as I understand it, the final boss music, Howl of the Departed. Dude, this is so cool. So I'm just basically going to read what I have here. It has this amazing intro where it's building up tension. Uematsu, we're going to talk about this with, I think, the next one. Uematsu is a master of building tension. And there are low piano pedal tones, or synth piano tones, keyboard pedal tones. And there's a choir chanting this 4-measure ostinato. The key center is totally ambiguous. We don't know if we're in E minor, F major. We don't know. We don't know because the ostinato is not setting up a key. And then all of a sudden, there are these really slow... Do you play guitar, Jameson?
I do not.
Or have you ever played a guitar?
I've tried.
Have
miserably.
Have you ever taken the pick of a guitar and scraped it down the strings?
Yes.
Okay, so that...
I know that sound.
He uses that sound, except it's really slow, so you get this really unpleasant screeching kind of sound. It's not... Screeching's maybe not the right word. It sounds like... it just sounds like something is being dragged very slowly, because it is the pick. And it's so cool. And then out of nowhere, it turns into a Liquid Tension experiment or a Dream Theater like prog rock song. Out of nowhere.
It's crazy. The beginning of that song is what you would expect it to be exactly what it is. It sounds like the building up, you've got your chanting vocals, and then when it starts going, it's like absolutely slaying guitars, right? Like it just hits immediately right in your face. There's no chance to even like realize that it's happening, and then it just keeps going, and I love that kind of stuff, especially like Black Mages. They do a little bit of that too.
Ooh, that's a little tease. We're getting there though. No, it's okay. No, it seriously is. It's straight ahead prog rock, dude. Like the drums are going in 4/4, and the guitars are doing this really cool shape in 12/8, and it's like the key signature starts changing. It's wild. It's so cool. The key
awesome
signature.
ride.
I meant to say time signature. See, I am a little bit rusty. I'm not rusty to be forgetting like 5th grade terms. I'm just stupid. But that's about all I have for Lost Odyssey. I like this one a lot. This is my least favorite of the 3 that we're talking about today.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I would probably agree with you because our next choices I know are good. But this one is still very interesting and far better than I remember it. So it was enjoyable to get a chance to listen to it again.
You want to move on to the next one?
Let's do it.
All right, the second OST that we're going to talk about absolutely blew me away. And this is from a game called Grand Blue Fantasy. So had you ever heard of this before?
This somehow completely missed my radar. I never actually really heard about Grand Blue Fantasy ever.
I didn't know that this was a thing. And just a little peek behind the scenes. I mentioned that Jameson and I were working on this doc together, and I had mentioned that Uematsu's last credit as a composer, as of right now, is a game that is something that hasn't come out yet, and it's called Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. And, I put it down, and Jameson wrote like, oh, hey, I found the soundtrack. And I looked it up, and I was like, oh, this is actually the first Grand Blue Fantasy because there are multiple. This one's from 2014. And I was like, I don't know anything about this. I don't think either of us do. Why don't we just do it and see what happens? And we're like, okay. And dude, I kid you not, this is now in my top 5 OSTs for Uematsu. This is
Unreal,
so
man.
good.
It's awesome. I just how much I didn't know about this game as I looked up. I'm like, oh, that's got to be the game he's talking about. So I'm like, I'll listen to this and see if that's what it is. And it's fantastic. But I didn't realize that this game came out back in 2014, and that there's a new one. It totally missed my version of the internet, I guess.
So for folks that are like us that have just never heard of this, this is a Japanese-only game, and it came out as, I'm just going to read what Wikipedia has for this. And, okay, I'm going to go on a quick little tangent here, just super quick. Wikipedia is fine. And I'm saying this as a former academic. Wikipedia is fine if you keep in mind that it's a secondary source, right? If Jameson writes a biography, and in the biography Jameson says, I once ate 50 hot dogs, and I have the receipts to prove it, and then I cite that biography, that is a primary source. If somebody comes along and says, one time Jameson ate 50 hot dogs, and they cite me, you're citing a secondary source. That's where you get into trouble. You got to go to primary sources. Wikipedia mostly always has primary sources listed. End of rant. That's all. But
excellent point, man.
But Grand Blue, I can't say this. Grand Blue Fantasy is a Japanese social network game and role-playing video game developed for Android, iOS, and web browsers, which came out in March of 2014. This was composed by Uematsu, obviously, and the art direction was done by Hideo Minaba, who collaborated on Final Fantasy V, 6, 9, and Lost Odyssey.
Yeah, some crossover.
Yeah, I don't know much about it other than that. I don't know what a social network game is. I don't know. Again, Wikipedia, but it's saying that it's like a game played on social media. I don't know how that would work, and I don't know why Uematsu would go as hard as he did for the soundtrack if it was like a Farmville sort of thing. but holy moly, dude, this This OST is incredible.
It's fantastic. For a mobile game, this blew me away. There was no way in shape or form or anything I would have guessed it was going to be. I read the description online, when you sent it to me, I checked on my Wikipedias, and I'm like, a mobile game? I'm like, how did he get involved in this? This is so strange. So then I looked up the soundtrack, started listening, and I'm like, this is music for an absolutely full video game.
Yeah, it's crazy. The instrumentation. It is a woodwind-heavy orchestral instrumentation. You're going to hear, string section, percussion section, trumpet section. But it's very heavy in the woodwinds, specifically the flutes. And that's because this was inspired heavily by Celtic, Irish, and Scottish music. So you are going to hear your concert flutes, your alto flutes, and I apologize if I'm getting the terminology wrong because I am not a flute expert, sort of traditional Celtic, Irish, Scottish flute instruments, whether they're folk instruments, penny whistles, tin whistles, recorders. I'm not exactly sure what, but you can hear it in your mind's eye, your mind's ear, I think. This sort of high-pitched, not quite as strong as the piccolo, sort of quieter. And man, oh man, does it work great.
It shows, especially for it being as recent as it is, and it's still, again, not the most recent version of this game and most recent work he has done, but it is a total evolution, because he's even said before in the past that he really likes Celtic music, and you see him, it's almost like he's like, I got a free blank slate to do whatever I want with this one, and he went to the wind with it. He went all the way. It's great soundtrack. And one of the things I was going to mention is, because I know you could pull out some of those instruments better than I can. I'm going to cut myself off. This one. What was the instrument you sent me earlier that was really amazing?
Shakuhachi.
Yes. It's the opposite of that kind of sound, right? In this game, I don't know how you describe the difference between those two.
Between shakuhachi and these
and
flutes?
The more Celtic type sounds, yeah.
Shakuhachi is a lower pitched flute, and it is characterized by its ability, it's microtonal as far as Westerners are concerned. It does not play like the major scale. I mean, it can, but it's not based on that. And there is a glissando element, so instead of do, you can go do, just go straight down.
Gotcha. Okay, that's why those instruments tend to sound like they have a little bit of morosity to them, right? They sound a little bit sad, right? Yeah.
Yeah. These flutes that we're hearing, these folk flutes, they are designed for the Western system of music. They're just higher pitched, right? It's like a recorder and a flute had a baby.
That's a beautiful description.
So we started with the main theme last time. Let's talk about the main theme here. What are your thoughts on it?
This song is a great introduction to a game I haven't played. It has an amazing, soft and really sentimental type of sound to it in the beginning, and it picks up and it goes complete. It's a very soaring and very interesting. That I really, really enjoy that kind of stuff when it happens in a game. There's something about being lifted by the music. Either emotionally or sequentially, in this kind of case where they're taking you through what you're supposed to experience in the game. This was a great setup for it.
I like that you use that word soaring, because this is pure overture. This is an overture if there ever was one, and it's just introducing you to what you are in store for, and it is very soaring. My first sentence under this is this is jubilant as hell. And it is. It's Uematsu meets John Williams meets Frank Tekeli. There is a trumpet solo in the first minute, and it is like if you took the trumpet solo from Summon the Heroes that people might be familiar with from the Olympics, and just gave it a little more energy and made it faster. So John Williams. It is wild, dude. I was not expecting a full overture to be starting this social network game.
It's every time you bring that up, it's a really good point. It is just so much more than you would have expected for it.
It's crazy. I can't believe I've never even heard of this soundtrack before. We both had the same note on the battle music. It's Final Fantasy.
Final Fantasy.
I mean, I think of Final Fantasy battle music, that's what it is.
Yeah, 100%. It's iconic, and when you hear it again, it's like, oh yeah, hey, I know that.
There was one that I wanted to bring up because this track just blew me out of the water, and it is Dancing Wind.
I loved that one, man. I'm really glad that you brought it up.
I was not expecting to have Uematsu compose a legitimate reel, like an reel, like a Celtic, Scottish, Irish reel. You can kind of use all of those interchangeably. This is wild. This is this is a reel. This is a dance tune. So for folks that don't know, and I'm not an authority on Celtic or Irish music or fiddles or anything like that, a reel there's reels and there are jigs, and they are both in duple meter. Jigs are in what's called compound duple meter, so 6/8. So you've got 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6. It's that kind of a dance. Reels are in simple duple meter or simple quadruple. I mean, it's the same thing. 2/4 or 4/4. So you've got doon 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 3/4, like that kind of thing. And it's music designed to dance to. It is for music of the people, the common folk, to dance. And he's just fiddling away, and there's like a flute or that's just going with it. It is, I mean, you're hearing it now if I'm doing my job right. This is incredible. I listened to this like 10 times in a row today. It is amazing. I don't know much about, like, I'm not an authority on this, as I said. I have played several reels with saxophone quartets in the past, just like arranging them to play as encores, to play for like high schoolers, because it's so much fun. It's energetic music. You can dance to it. Like, I love it. I really, really love it. There's a saxophonist that I really like named Eddie Barbish that plays a lot of like bluegrass and fiddle music on saxophone. It's super fucking cool.
That's pretty cool,
like, he is a bad man. He's so good. But yeah, dude, like, I don't have much more to say about it without just gushing. This is just incredible.
I don't think I can add much to it either, but I can tell you that it's worth listening to. If you seek out any song that we've been talking about so far, this is definitely one that's worth it, because like, it'll get your toes tapping. Like, if you're not the dancing type, it's a good song. It is a great uplifting song.
I let's maybe talk about the final one, Crisis. But before we do, I just wanted to touch on another favorite of mine. It's titled Augusta Isles Babbling Falls. We don't have to sit on this too long. It is straight up a Schubert art song. It is gorgeous. It sounds like an aria or like a song that Schubert or maybe even Schumann would have written. Maybe not Schumann. He got a little dark. Schubert was more pleasant, you know. That's maybe not the right word, but you know what I mean. It's beautiful, 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 beautiful. But let's talk a little bit about Crisis.
Let's do it. Awesome.
There is what Final Fantasy VII track does this remind you of? Because it's so clear to me.
Crisis? Does it sound like what I think it sounds like? It sounds a little bit like Sephiroth.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, dude. It's immediately.
Yeah, because I'm like, it seems like it's too obvious of an answer, but I don't want to be wrong.
No, dude. No, I'm wrong all the time. It's fine.
That is, it's true. It's true though. It does sound. It has a lot of those type of similarities between the two.
So I'm gonna. I feel really pretentious, like trying to spout off musical terminology here, but I'm gonna do it again because like that's just how I think about it. So an ostinato in music is a repeated figure. You know, if you just play two notes back to back, bum 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 bum, that can be an ostinato. That's all it is. It's a repeating figure. And what we have here is an ostinato of half steps, dun 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 dun, in the strings with accented beats. Jun, dun, jun, 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 jun. It's almost like Rite of Spring before it gets crazy. And what's cool about this is it doesn't let you set up those two, those half steps. It doesn't let you set up a key area. What that means, if you're somebody that doesn't, study music theory, is we don't know if we're in major, minor, what. What that translates to is tension. Again, he's the master of tension. And all above these two notes being played over and over, you get these melodic fragments creating dissonance. We don't know. Everything is ambiguous. It's rising. The dissonance is getting more and more. There's crunch. and we don't know where we're going. So we're feeling extremely tense like you would in a crisis. And then, of course, it further develops and develops and develops. But this is like this. I am social network game, dude. I keep coming back to it. Like, are you kidding me?
It's amazing. I don't know what it's like to experience this on a phone. I can't imagine that you're listening to this out of your iPhone or Android or whatever you're playing it on the train in Japan. Like, you have to have headphones, right? Like, you have to experience this music. There
are weirdos out there that will like play games like this or like Persona and Final Fantasy with like the volume off. Like, I don't get it.
That sounds illegal.
Like, I'm not trying to like yuck anybody's yum or anything. I play Pokemon with sound off or like Rocket League, but like, and that's not to diss Pokemon's music. It's very good, but like, I can only hear the when I get into a random battle. I can only hear that so many times, man.
I get it, man. Yeah, especially if you're playing the Game Boy. Like, it's okay.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Those older sound chips, they're a little rough.
A little piercing at times. It happens.
But yeah, I mean, do you have anything else on Grand Blue? I cannot say this. Grand Blue Fantasy. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No, I don't. I don't, but I really did like this soundtrack. I wish I could listen to it more in depth, but for an hour, it's over an hour long if you listen to it straight through. And honestly, it's just over an hour long if you listen to it straight through, which is great. The variety in this soundtrack was fantastic. I feel like I'm experiencing a game I'm probably never going to play, but it's actually really piqued my curiosity on Grand Blue Fantasy Relink.
I might at the very least look up like YouTube videos of like somebody that has played this or something.
I just want to know a little bit more. But sometimes that's a great thing about discovering new music from a game or something like that is like you can follow the rabbit hole, watch YouTube videos of Let's Plays. You can even emulate them or find them yourself because it may actually just entice you that much more to actually go find the game and play it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna listen to only one, well, I don't want to say that because the next thing that we're talking about is pretty awesome. But if you're deciding between Lost Odyssey and this to just listen to this, man, it's so good. There are some tracks on here that are unremarkable insofar as like they're good, they're very good. It's just, to use Uematsu's words, we've heard it before.
Yeah.
But these ones that we've talked about, the main theme, the Dancing Wind, the Babbling Falls and Crisis, they are phenomenal. This is some of Uematsu's best work, in my opinion. At the very least, like top 10.
I love it. That's a big thing to reveal. So yeah, I'm happy to know that. I feel like this is probably I'm gonna have to give it that deeper listen to now because I really want to experience it the same kind of way that obviously you have. You know a little bit more than me, and I know you made it all the way through, right? You listened to the whole thing front to back.
The ones that after a minute felt kind of just okay, I just skipped through.
Yeah, that's fair. Like the battle music.
Yeah, like yeah. I've played enough Final Fantasy. I know how that goes.
Cool, man. Yeah, I don't have, other than that, I don't really have anything to add. I did really enjoy it, and I'm really glad that I got to experience it. Thanks for introducing me to it.
Hey man, you're just as much to thank too. I mean, you posted the link, and then that got us both to say like, yeah, we don't know anything about this. Yeah, let's do it. But why don't you introduce the last album that we're talking about today?
All right. So the last album we're going to talk about is the super awesome special side project of Uematsu and a few of his friends called the Black Mages.
Yes. So we've talked this whole episode about how Uematsu likes prog rock, prog metal, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Pink Floyd. Yes, he went and did it, man. He and a bunch of Square employees went and made their own prog rock group. First one that has since been disbanded have been the Black Mages, and he's in another one today called, and I love this title, the Earthbound Papas.
That's such a great name. Did you see their album names too?
Yes.
Octave Theory and Dancing Dad.
Dancing Dad. That is my favorite. I love it. And in case you couldn't tell by Dancing Dad, what both of these groups do, Black Mages and the Earthbound Papas, they take music from, the Black Mages took music exclusively from Final Fantasy, and then the Earthbound Papas added a couple of extra games. I know Blue Dragon was one. I can't remember the other ones, but
I think it got into like Lord of Vermilion and a couple other of his releases post Square.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the first ones were the Black Mages was almost predominantly Final Fantasy, and then this was where he still got to do some Final Fantasy songs, but then introduced like the other stuff that I think he just had like a more recent passion for. So that made it pretty exciting to listen to, because I hadn't actually heard about the Earthbound Papas until you had actually told me about them. So it was pretty cool. I got to experience some of these songs both ways.
For sure, man. The Black Mages, they were, I almost said the Black Papas. That's something different. The Black Mages, it was formed by Uematsu, along with two other composers from Square Enix, those being Kenichiro Fukui and Tsuyoshi Sekito. They all formed the Black Mages, and some of the tracks on this album, and you can find the whole thing on YouTube, by the way. They've got the battle scene from Final Fantasy 1, the battle scene from Final Fantasy 2. What do they've got? They've got Genova from, you guessed it, Final Fantasy 7. They got Dancing Mad, obviously, and one of my favorites on this, Fight with Seymour from Final Fantasy X.
It was a wonderful addition that I wasn't expecting when I was listening to this. It was a great, it's the last track on the album too, I believe, and it's awesome. It's such a totally different interpretation of that song, but it still sounds just like it.
I think that might be my favorite on the album. It's between that and the Battle Scene 2 from Final Fantasy 2. Those, okay. I love both of those reimaginings here. And that's what this whole album is. It's literally, the cool thing about Uematsu is when you place his melodies in a prog rock setting, it's immediately apparent, like, oh yeah, like he loves this. You can just tell. It just fits. And there are elements of 80s neoclassical as well, like shredding guitars. Think of your Jason Beckers, who is a personal favorite of mine. You know, Yngwie Malmsteen, Paul Gilbert, like that kind of thing. Paul wasn't really neoclassical, but you know what I mean. Marty Friedman, let's say that. Yeah, and this is just crazy. It's so good.
Great. It's interesting because it's very thematic. Like each one of them, like, oh, I know these things. I can experience them again in a guitar manner, right? But it's different because it's almost like reconstructions instead. Because there's no limitations. These guys created something in a whole new way, as if they were building it from the ground up again.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Seymour's battle theme as being like really altered, but in a good way, like in a cool way.
Yeah.
That one was really cool to me. Another really cool one that was really different was the battle theme from Final Fantasy VI, which, you know, if you've played that recently, like I have, it's like, you know, da 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 da. It's like very upbeat. Not here. This one in here chugs, dude.
It's got chuggy guitars.
It's so
it is
heavy.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. The heavy rocking guitars I don't really know how else to say it better, but it just slays the shit out of this track. They're so important, so awesome.
Oh yeah, it's phenomenal, and the whole album, by the way, is under an hour. It's under 55 minutes. It's 51 and a half minutes. That's it. And man, it's so good. None of the tunes overstay their welcome either. Like they're all, you know, when I feel like when you say prog rock, prog metal, people immediately think 12 minutes, which let me just be clear, 12-minute piece of music, that's nothing. You know, that's back in my day. We listened to the whole Ring cycle and we liked it as we walked home from school. But I mean, No, all of these are 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes. Some of them, this one is just over 3 minutes. It's very approachable, dude. And I think you recommended this, if I'm not mistaken, but I love this so much. I had never actually sat down and listened to this.
Yeah, man, I love the Black Mage. The first time I discovered them was a friend of mine. He's like, "You got to listen to this. I found this." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. What is it?" And he tells me the name. I'm like, "Oh, Black Mages. Maybe it's like some like deathcore metal band or something like that." And then he's like, "No. It's Final Fantasy music. You got to check this out." And we sat there. Honestly, I don't do this a lot in my life, but I genuinely sat down and I think we listened to the entire thing. No interaction. We're not playing games at the same time. Like, we just listened to the soundtrack. And then we talked about the games that they came from. It was a cool experience to be able to share with somebody. And I can't really say I've done that about a lot of music since then, but it was really enjoyable the first time I heard this music. And now that I listen to it again, it gives me that same feeling. I still feel that same energy and excitement from it.
Now, I don't know about you, but personally, I like the Earthbound Papas a little more, just from what I've heard. Particularly, I mean, Dancing Mad is on the Black Mages album, and then the Earthbound Papas do Dancing Dad. And it's just so heavy, dude. It's so good. It's so funny. Like thinking from a music perspective, something that I used to do is particularly when I was practicing Bach, I would, if I couldn't figure out how I wanted to phrase it, I would always, and this kind of goes back to the idea of limiting yourself for the purpose of creativity. I would always first I would play it how I was trying, and I would inevitably get frustrated, and then I would say, okay, I'm going to play through it once, and I'm going to do it so straight, just perpetual motion, just nonstop, no embellishments, no highlighting the chord changes, nothing. And then the next time I would say, okay, I'm going to play this like a military march. Just nothing, in no universe would you ever play Bach like that. And then I would say, okay, now I'm going to play it like a jazz saxophonist, like Chris Potter, God willing I could ever get there, or Chris Vidala. And I would improvise over Bach. And what that does is it unlocks secrets within the music and secrets within yourself about the artistic process. And then you learn, it's been there all along. This is how I do it. I'm not going to play it like Charlie Parker, but, that helped me learn something. And with Dancing Dad, they did way more than this, but the first thing I noticed, they just slowed it down a little, just a little bit. And that just pushed it through the roof for me. I was like, oh my God, this is the ticket. Let's go. This is great. Yeah, great pick on the Black Mages.
I love the Black Mages, and I can't believe I didn't know about the Earthbound Papas until now. And when I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't know that. So listening to it, I was like, oh cool, I'm having a brand new experience all over again. This is awesome. And I listened to both Dancing Mad. Actually, I legitimately probably spent an entire evening listening to various versions of Dancing Mad and Dancing Dad, and from the original games all the way up. And I'd have to say that the Earthbound Papas version might be my favorite version.
The Earthbound Papas also did a version of One Winged Angel, as well as Dancing Mad, and I teased at the beginning that we were going to end with just a little debate. And here it is. You've all been craving the Final Fantasy talk. We've danced around it like dads. Well, I'm not a dad, but I've got the jokes as if I were a dad, which kind of makes me a faux pas. Oh God.
That was great.
Let's do it. Let's just have a really quick back and forth. Which do you prefer? Dancing Mad in the original version, of course, not the.
We'll talk about the originals. Okay, all right.
Dancing Mad or One Winged Angel?
It's really hard. It's really hard to pick.
Yeah, dude. To be clear, they are both top tier. They're both incredible compositions.
When you look at them from what they are, right? You look at them at their time period. I was two different sides of the 90s and two different platforms of technology. I would prefer personally to rank them based on their time periods and truly face them off against each other. But I'm probably going to say the opposite of you. I think I really like One Winged Angel more.
I mean, you're in great company. I think most people would say that is his crowning video game achievement.
It's incredible, man. Personal story-wise, I can tell you is that my wife and I took our son to see the Final Fantasy Distant Worlds concert.
Oh man, I'm jealous.
Which was a super cool experience. It was equal parts people dressed up really nice and also people dressed in cosplay. It was a very bizarre crowd to be sitting in. But one of the things that was really, really cool, and I'm pretty sure they probably still do it for all of the parts of the tour as they go around, but they do like a little bit of like a spiel at the end, like, okay, we're done, thanks for coming, blah, 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 and then they'll bust out like just a couple of notes at the beginning of the psycho-esque sounds of the beginning of One Winged Angel, and then they pause, and then the conductor comes out and tells you, he's like, you guys know where we're going with this. We want you to say Sephiroth. And then they teach you to practice, like a little bit, like, okay, here's your part, and everybody points. And if nobody in the crowd does a good job, they kind of do like an awkward violin sound to you, you know. So then they do it again, and everyone gets it right. The entire theater gets it right. And he's like, okay, we're good. And then they play it live, and it is incredible to hear live with probably, I don't know how many people were in the theater I was in, but it was hundreds plus. It was a lot. And to hear an entire room full of people shouting out in chorus the Sephiroth parts, it was awesome. It was a really cool personal experience, and I think that might be what puts it up at the top for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, man, that's incredible. I really want to go to one of these days. A friend of mine ended up coming down with COVID, and they had to sell their tickets, and they reached out to me. They're like, hey, do you want to go? It's in Pittsburgh. I was like, man, I actually can't because I'm working, which was a bummer.
Man. I hope you can see it sometime, man. Of all people, I want you to be able to experience. I think you'd like it.
Eventually. I'm sure it will happen.
It's making its way around again, I heard.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'll have to look it up. I'll send it to you.
Cool. Going back to the which one do you like better? Here's the thing. I think strictly as a composition, I mean, don't get me wrong, as compositions, they're both incredible. I think One Winged Angel might be the better composition, just strictly on a music level. However, Dancing Mad incorporates the end boss of Final Fantasy VI, and if you haven't played it, I'm going to mildly spoil it. It's Kefka, obviously, but you're climbing as you go up this Kefka's tower. Go listen to the Final Fantasy VI finale if you want to hear me really go into this. But you are climbing this twisted tower, this bizarro Tower of Babel, is I think how I put it. But you are not trying to reach God. You are trying to reach this twisted, demented, the opposite of this monstrosity that is Kefka. And the music reflects that, because as you're going up, when you reach what would be purgatory, the music changes, and whenever you're ascending to the very top, as if you were ascending to heaven, that is where the organ kicks in, and it becomes very revenant as you're seeing this twisted being, and you're like, this shouldn't be, and then all of a sudden it kicks into like the the Kefka theme, but turned up to like fucking 12. It's crazy. For that alone, for how well it works into the final fight, I have to give it to that. But yeah. I cannot deny that One Winged Angel is an incredible composition.
I totally, I honestly, so here's the thing with Dancing Mad. I do love it. I can listen to 2 One Winged Angels by the time I listen to 1 Dancing Mad, though, and I think that could also help it.
It is 17 minutes. It's not that bad.
It's just shy of 20.
It's not that bad.
No, it's not that bad. It really is enjoyable because it does change each of those movements. It makes it new and exciting all over again. I thankfully I have a version of it on my computer that I've probably downloaded from somewhere that I got. It's broken up into the different sections, so I can kind of pick around if I choose. But it's really hard. I don't know if I necessarily have a favorite section. You kind of have to enjoy it as a whole. I'm a huge fan of the organ section that kind of turns it into a fugue. I don't know if it's actually a fugue, but it kind of resembles like Toccata and Fugue stuff, right? Isn't that kind of where some of that I've seen people make that connection online?
Yeah. I think that's largely because it's an organ playing, fugue-like lines. But no, I mean that's not off base at all. It kind of does. I don't know if it's actually a fugue. I don't remember. They're both just so good. You can't go wrong. I mean, look, man, it's shorter than an episode of Seinfeld. I mean, it's not that bad. What are you going to do? You're going to sit through an episode of King of Queens, or are you going to listen to Dancing Mad?
Yeah.
Come on.
I think I'll just do another. I'm already up this late. Just restart Dancing Mad. A little more, You can always do one more Dancing Mad.
Oh, man, you could do an entire series, like an entire series on Uematsu, and it would still, leave something to be desired. I know this is a somewhat shorter episode, maybe not really. I know we're gonna miss a ton, but I've had a blast, man. This is one of my favorite episodes that I've recorded in recent memory, and I couldn't have picked a better person. I remember when I first thought of doing this, I was talking to Chris Copleen at the time because we were already doing Final Fantasy VI, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna have to pass. Like, I think you'll just have to find the right person." And then I discovered your podcast, Jameson, which I'm about to ask you to plug because we're at the end of the episode. And it was like, oh, he's the one person doing a video game music podcast that I know of. Let me check it out. Oh, it's really, really good. Of course I'm going to ask him. Like, it was perfect.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
So going into that, I want to talk with you about your podcast. I want to pull it up real quick because I am blanking on titles of stuff.
Oh, sure.
But I've listened to several of your episodes, obviously. I think the first one I listened to was Ridge Racer because that game has terrific soundtracks. Directly before that, in February, you did one on a game that I love, Jet Set Radio.
That's one of my favorites, man.
Hideki Naganuma, one of the funky, freshest composers around.
That guy's unbelievable. Total weirdo on Twitter, but
I was about to say... I was about to say A+ Twitter follow, actually.
Yeah. Oh, you have to. It's almost mandatory. The dude is like a constant. There's no other brother. He's kind of a shit poster, and I'm totally into it.
There was a period of time where he was just tweeting nonstop, like, I could beat up the president of Russia. I could beat up President Trump. He's scared of me. And then the very next one, he would be like, I'm a single man looking for a lovely woman. It's just incredible. He's wonderful. But we're not talking about Hideki Naganuma. We're talking about you. So I'm going to ask you two things. I want you to pitch your show to our listeners because I think they will genuinely love your show. And if you wouldn't mind, I would love for you to suggest an episode for them to start with.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate the compliments. And honestly, thanks for having me on your show. I really enjoy your show. There's such a great quality to it. It's like you speak in depth with great people that you have as guests, and I'm honored to be one of them. But you also cover a bunch of really great games, and I find them very interesting to listen to. I'm usually learning something, whether I've played that game or not. So it's actually pretty cool. So thank you for reaching out to me all of those months ago and give me some time to like think through, because to be honest, this is like one of my first experiences being on another show. So I'm glad we got to talk about something as fun as Uematsu.
Well, just a super quick little shout out. Jameson and I did another music related episode on the podcast Super Pod Saga with our friends Aaron and Tommy. Well, Tommy couldn't make it for that one, but it was a round table where we just talked about some of our favorite music. I highly recommend it. Aaron has a great show. Well, Aaron and Tommy, they have a great show, and it was a really fun episode. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, Super Pod Saga was great. It was cool to be able to do that with you too and get a chance to actually catch up and talk for the first time. So getting to this, yes. Like we actually talked a lot about probably one of my favorite composers. And I have to embarrassingly admit before I pitch my show is that I haven't actually done an episode on Uematsu yet. And I really, really, really want to. I may pick it by game in order to do so. So keep tuned for that. Yeah. So after being on that show, it was really awesome. And I can say that, honestly, working on my own show is a little bit different because I run a solo show. So it's just me and I do an episode once a month and I talk about video games that have excellent or remarkable soundtracks in some fashion, whether focus on the composer or focus on the individual game itself. It's kind of like a listen and learn. Where you can hear me talk about some of the video games that I absolutely love and their soundtracks, and then we actually get to listen to them. So I'll play it in block style, so you hear a handful of tracks at a time, learn about the next game in the series, play some more music. It's a pretty fun experience, and it's been something I've been working on for like the last year and a half or so now. But I like it, and I'm really glad to find out that I get to meet people like you, Rick, and Aaron and Tommy have been really awesome, and a really great welcoming community on the internet. to something I thought I was going to be sending out into the ether. I wasn't sure it was really going to go anywhere, but I've found myself talking about video game music pretty much my whole life, or like I mentioned earlier, like recording it in some way so I could listen to it away from the context of the game. So I try and find and specialize, like especially focus on music that can be listened to outside of the game, that can be enjoyed in some fashion, because sometimes video game music gets trapped to the medium that it's on. And it's really nice to see the world change a little bit. You can find video game music on Spotify. You don't have to dig as much on the internet as you used to. So I am kind of using my show as a way to encourage people to find, either through games that they love, more video game music, or through video game music, find games that they might want to try. Oh, go ahead, man.
Nope. After you.
I'll say, and if anything, if any of this sounds interesting to you, you can go to barsilence.com, where you can find my show. You can find an easy link to download or subscribe on whatever your favorite podcatcher is. Or you can listen on the absolutely stellar video game music internet radio station called 8 Beats Radio. Super cool guys. I got to meet them very early on in my show, and since then my show will appear on their radio station, but it is a 24/7 around the clock video game music station, and it is really interesting because they have DJs from across the world. They'll have a couple different shows, mine being one of them, and it's just nice because it's a little bit of exposure to other people, but because it's an international radio station, I get to learn a little bit about music that I haven't heard myself. So it's worth checking out.
Can you say the name of that one more time? This is the first I'm learning of them.
Oh, yeah. 8 Beats Radio. So they go to 8beats.co, and that's their website. It's an internet radio station, so it's playing around the clock 24/7. They'll have various music, different composers, different genres, and then their DJ mixes and other themed episodes that the 8 Beats Radio team will put together, or just other video game music fans have kind of contributed to, and it gets mixed in throughout the day, which is pretty cool. So it's like listening to like your favorite college radio station, except for its video games.
That's awesome, man. I'm going to check that out, and I really think everybody should. And I encourage everybody to check out barSILENCE, Jameson's show. It's very good. I've listened to quite a few episodes, not all of them, but I've listened to quite a few. It's high quality. I was checking just a moment ago. They're all roughly an hour. Some of them 55 minutes, some an hour and 4 minutes. You're not in for the long haul like you are here, for better or for worse. So absolutely check it out. It's low commitment. It's easy stuff. It's music, man. I mean, everybody loves music. So I really give it a high recommendation.
Thank you.
And follow Jameson on Twitter and Instagram, because he's there too.
Yeah. barSILENCE. Usually I'm probably most active on Twitter, but you can hit me up there at barSILENCE BGM. Friends with Rick and the gang there, so you can find me pretty much anywhere on the internet, usually under that name.
Absolutely, and I recommend you all do. And if you haven't followed us yet either, well, now's your chance. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram. You just search Pixel Project Radio. We'll come up no matter what. You can't stop us. We're also on Discord. We've got a Discord server, and listen, my goal for 2023 is to get the server more active. I really like when the server is active, and these days lately, it's been a little not so much. And I would love to see just lots of people having a good time talking about games, shit posting. I recently made an all emoji channel where you just communicate through emojis. It's stupid. It's really dumb, but it's fun. You can find that link in the show notes as well as in on the socials. We've also got a Patreon. Now listen, I'm not going to fool you. I don't fool you on any of these episodes. You know what I like a lot? I like money. And you can give it to us if you want. I'm joking a little bit. I'm being facetious. But if you do like the show and you want to help support so I can keep making quality content, you can do so at patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. As little as $2. I purposefully made the $2 tier, the one where you get the most bang for your buck. You are going to get extra episodes, our schedule 2 months in advance, and voting privileges. The patrons decide what I play for the patron exclusive episodes. For example, the upcoming one, Donkey Kong 94 for the Game Boy. Also Tomba 2. Also the Sopranos game for PS2 that is going to be terrible, but I can't wait. So you can do that again at patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. One last little plug, and I'm going to plug it for Jameson too. if you want to rate or review our shows, that is extremely helpful for us. It is free, and at least here on Pixel Project Radio, I will read your review. Even if it is, well, I might not read it if it's really mean, but if it's honest, if it's, glowing, I would love a 5-star review, but I will read them on air. We haven't got new ones in a minute, so if you wanted to do that, that would help the show out quite a bit, and it would make me feel nice. So it's free. You can do that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Podcast Addict. Now that we've got the plugin out of the way, I think we can unplug. See what I did there? That's what we call a double pun, because I said plug and we're talking about music. You unplug amplifiers. It's a whole thing. Please don't let that influence your decision to go to patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. Anyway, Jameson, I gotta say, man,
yeah.
yeah, that too. It's been an absolute blast. It's been a pleasure having you here. I hope folks go to check out your stuff because it is high quality, and I hope this isn't the last time we work together because it's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, man. I've really enjoyed being here too. Let's definitely do something together. Let's keep working together. I'll have to maybe see if we can get you on my show. I haven't really done an interview, but maybe we'll try it sometime.
Hey, whatever works. It's your house.
Or maybe I can dedicate an episode to Tumba 2 for you.
Oh my God, that's such a good game. Anyways, folks, thank you for sticking around. I really appreciate you. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the Discord, in the Twitter, in the Instagram. We're happy that you're here. As always, I've been your maestro. Here is my curtain call. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am Rick Firestone. We'll see you all next time. I'm bidding you adieu.